Jack Thunder and the Fragments of Anima. Book 5. Fire. Chapter 1. The Howling Mountains. The Howling Range is not a pleasant place to be. It lives up to its name all throughout the year. Even in the summer, freezing winds blow throughout, blanketing the land in snow and threatening to freeze anyone who isn't a fire elemental solid. And in the winter, well, let's just say that two kitsune traveling through were learning just how dangerous the mountains could be. The elder, a red-furred kitsune with a white, fox-like muzzle and 3 tails, wiped her jade eyes. Even though she was all decked out in fur, the chilling gale threatened to take her eyesight as it blew fresh frost into her eyes. She just needed to hold on for a couple more minutes. They would be arriving at their destination any day now. "I see it! It's right up ahead!" the younger shouted over the din. Her fur was opposite her elder's. She had white fur with a red muzzle and 2 tails, if you don't count the red foxtail of hair cascading from her head. The red kitsune opened her eyes. Before her was a valley cradled in the middle of the fierce mountain range. It was warm and balmy, the exact opposite of the land they found themselves in now. Miles and miles of green met their eyes. "Good eye, Kirami." "Are you sure we'll find it here, Altairia?" Kirami shouted once more. Altairia nodded. "I'm certain of it. I know Yuuki. It calls out to me no matter where I am." As the two traversed down the mountain, the weather grew calm. Here, Altairia could sit and watch without fear of her eyes freezing shut. Eventually, the howling wind of the mountains gave way to the soft screams of cicadas and other tropical insects. Altairia sighed and shrugged off her now snow-caked furs. After spending so much time in the howling range, the rainforest's heat was quite a shock. Not that she minded at all. If the howling range was winter all year round, the jungle of the wise serpent was an endless summer, just right for a fire elemental like her. Kirami sat next to her as the two rode their way eastward through the jungle. Altairia's sixth sense was the only thing guiding her in the right direction. It was impossible to see anything in the brush. Just a wall of trees and vines. She may as well have been in a labyrinth. Kirami, for her part, was fixated on the canopy above them. She didn't want to be caught unawares by a venomous snake falling from a tree branch into her lap. Eventually, they got to a spot where they could see what they were looking for. Through the thick leaves and vines, they could faintly make out the top of an imposing volcano. They both knew what this was. Mount Inferno. Altairia bit her lip. Mount Inferno was no ordinary volcano, you see. Buried underneath the mountain was a prison housing the worst and most dangerous criminals Altairus has ever known. And guarding it was none other than the lava dragon Grimhide. As tall as a mountain and as ruthless as he was steadfast, he ensured that none of the prisoners even thought about escape while he was there. Why would they, with him as the warden? "Altairia, does Mount Inferno always smoke like that?" Kirami asked. She had seen the volcano a few times before, but it wasn't an active volcano, was it? "It's probably just Grimhide smoke," Altairia reassured her. But even that sounded far-fetched in her ears. Something about this was off. Something was incredibly off. Inside Mount Inferno's cave, a massive dragon with scales like black igneous stones floating in a river of magma stirred. Its wings stretched, lighting up the entire room with their wildfire glow. Grimhide lifted his head off the floor of the cave. He awoke to yet another morning in the mountain. A lesser being would not have opted to live here. Just below him was a menagerie of villains of all shapes and sizes, waiting for their chance to strike. Falling asleep was just asking for one to slip through. But Grimhide was different. He was one of the biggest and strongest dragons in the world. He had taken down countless Wendigos during the war, and for most of his life here, the ne'er-do-wells never even tried to get past him. They were too scared to wake the dragon. Lately, though, that seemed to have changed. The prisoners were getting more brazen. It had only been a handful, but his two whelps, Goliath and Gilgamesh, had brought back 3 of them last week. Probably got out while he was sleeping. And this week, well, he groaned and shook his head, standing up to make his way to the cave entrance. Stepping outside, he looked up and saw the top of Mount Inferno belching black smoke. He narrowed his eyes. Mount Inferno was a volcano, yes, but it was an extinct volcano. It shouldn't have been smoking at all. And the color was not of ash, but of... He flew upwards to get a closer look at it. Up close, it definitely looked like ash. Ash that was close to the color of soot. But it wasn't soot. Looking even closer, Grimhide could see that the so-called ash was more like thousands upon thousands of tiny black blobs of ink. A lot like... Before Grimhide could inquire this more, he heard a crash from down below. Another band of prisoners had escaped out the front entrance. He grunted before chasing them down. Another day, another escape. After he was gone, a pair of blood-red eyes emerged from the smoke. Those eyes watched Grimhide as he flew after the escapees. For such a formidable creature, he sure was easy to distract. The figure in the black sighed in relief. If getting Grimhide out of the way was this easy, then the rest of its plan just might work out. Chapter 2. Air Surfing. Through the empty skies of Altairus, a single storm gremlin in a mango-orange jumpsuit surfed atop a billowing cloud. Winter was not Terry's season. Anyone could guess by his sunburned face and the scarlet emblem of a rolling wave and burning sun on his chest that Terry Paradise was all about summer. But the way he saw it, any season was ripe for cloud surfing. And on a day like today, when there were no other clouds in the sky, he didn't have to worry about running into anyone else as he tore his way through the air. Not only that, his view of the ground was as clear as a still pond. If he weren't so busy looking at the ground, he would have noticed the column of thick black smog he was headed straight towards before he ran into it. Terry coughed and spluttered, forcing his way out of the other side of the smoke cloud. Ugh, what was that? He turned around. The cloud must have stretched all the way to outer space, Terry thought. He turned his gaze downward towards the earth. Below him he could see a vast jungle surrounded by mountains. He was near the east coast of the continent Kirkea, not far from the jungle of the Wise Serpent. Spiraling down the smog column on his surfing cloud, Terry discovered the source of the smoke. It was coming from the top of Mount Inferno. The storm gremlin gulped. He had heard many unpleasant stories about Mount Inferno, but he hadn't heard any that mentioned smoke coming out the top. There was something off about this smoke, too. Just by looking at it, he began getting unpleasant flashbacks. Flashbacks to a few months ago, when Jack Thunder had found him deep inside Mount Tempest and expelled that Wendigo from his body. He was getting that same feeling once again. He put his hand up to his head, suddenly a bit dizzy and weak. Terry flew his cloud away from the smoke, and the feeling subsided. That's when he noticed something else on the ground. A wooden trailer was parked not far from the base of Mount Inferno. And though he was very high up, he thought he could see 2 fox people near it on the ground. The taller one was red with 3 tails, and the shorter was white with 2 tails. Who could they be? From the looks of it, they were concerned about the smoke coming from Mount Inferno too. In any case, the smoke was reason enough to get back to Tempest Island and tell Jack Thunder. The day the younger Storm Gremlin saved Terry, the sunny Storm Gremlin had promised to help in any way he could. Now, it seemed, he was getting that chance. Okay, home. Which way is home? All of a sudden, he remembered. He was heading west, so he had to go east. Which direction was east? Towards the sea facing Mount Inferno. Quickly finding it, Terry split the skies open, surfing as fast as he could towards the ocean. Hopefully, Tempest Island wasn't too far off. Shadowpaws looked down at his feet and sighed. I don't get it. Things had been pretty quiet ever since the Winter Solstice. When he and the others saved Ygdrassil in her grove, the Elder Goat had given him a pair of boots that gifted him with extra speed and agility. He said that these were supposed to help with the Nekomata's courage problem, but Shadowpaws didn't see how. He looked over to the others. They seemed to be having fun with their gifts. The Winter Solstice may have passed, but winter was still in full swing on Tempest Island. The grassy lowlands of the island were blanketed in white snow. The storm clouds shed snowflakes instead of raindrops, and Jack Thunder was sliding down the slopes with Buckthorn and Snotter in tow. You just wait. I'll beat you down there one of these days. How about another ride? Shadowpaws was too lost in his own thoughts to pay much mind. Though he had gotten used to the rumbling thunder on Tempest Island, he was still racked with anxiety. Having 2 big adventures in the span of a few months could do that to anyone, he thought. And there were still 2 fragments left. Would he make it through? Would any of them? Shadowpaws stood up. He decided to take a walk around the island. That would clear his mind. It was a small island, so he wasn't worried about getting lost. He just had to avoid falling off the edge and he would be fine. He made his way to the edge of the island and circled around, still lost in thought. His train of thought abruptly derailed, however, when a certain storm gremlin clad in orange and yellow flew straight into him. Terry landed on top of the Nekomata. He quickly stood up and dusted himself off. Oh, sorry about that. Shadowpaws grumbled. Thanks a lot for nearly knocking me off the island. What's up with you? Terry's antennae lay flat against his head. I'm sorry, but I was in a real hurry. Where's Jack? Wait, back up. What's going on here? It's Mount Inferno! Shadowpaws snapped right to attention. Mount Inferno was in trouble? This was bad on so many levels. It had smoke coming from the top and I think it might have been null magic. What's this about null magic? Shadowpaws whirled around to see Jack Thunder and San running up from behind him. Oh good, you're both here, Terry sighed in relief. What's going on with Mount Inferno, Terry? Jack Thunder asked. Terry took a deep breath. There's nasty smoke coming from Mount Inferno. I started feeling real sick when I flew through it. You know, kinda like when you got the flu. It was kind of like that. The mere idea that the Wendigos were around Mount Inferno was enough to drain all the color from San's face. But he knew better than to assume. Are you sure it was null magic? I'm sure anyone would get sick flying through a smoke cloud. Yes, I'm sure! Terry almost snapped. He took a few moments to recompose himself before continuing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap like that. It's just, if Mount Inferno is in trouble... San understood what he meant. Even before the war, San did well to stay away from Mount Inferno. There was no reason for him nor any of the other champions to risk their lives facing down Altairus' worst villains. And if those villains had access to null magic... San turned around, motioning for Jack Thunder, Terry, and Shadowpaws to climb on his back. Spreading his wings, the Tengu took flight, relentlessly searching the ground for Buckthorn and Snotter. There was no time to lose. Chapter 3. Surfship Down. Now this is more like it. You could learn something from him, Jack Thunder. Terry Paradise had been so kind to offer him and the rest of the team a ride over to Mount Inferno. The sunny storm gremlin led the charge, effortlessly guiding the billowing storm cloud over the expanse of the Lapis Ocean. San found it much easier on him than sliding down a rainbow was. He welcomed the change of pace. The Tengu's ease faded when a black mass brushed past his head. nearly grazing the feathers on his ears. Looking forward, he gaped in shock. The smog cloud directly in front of them didn't even look like a cloud of smoke. It looked more like a cloud of pure blackness. It writhed and twisted. Black masses of liquid null magic forming bubbles that blew up and collapsed into the cloud. Some of these bubbles broke off, filling the skies the heroes found themselves in. Terry did his best to weave his way around the bubbles. San's breathing hitched as Terry made another tight maneuver through an archway of null magic. Now he understood what Terry meant. This was more than mere volcanic smoke. This was something unholy, unnatural, and Anima only knew how far it had spread already. Just as it seemed like Terry had made his way through the storm, he accidentally clipped one of the bubbles from the right. His surfing cloud dissolved suddenly, sending himself, the 4 kid heroes, San and Frosty, flying towards the howling range just beyond Mount Inferno. San flapped his wings frantically as he grabbed onto Shadowpaws, Buckthorn, and Razor, the 3 closest to him. Jack Thunder used Stormbringer to produce several clouds in their path to try and cushion their fall. Even so, all of them made a rough landing. San found himself face down in the snow, Shadowpaws and Buckthorn still in his arms. At least, he thought he was in the snow. He suddenly had a hard time understanding just where he was, or anything really. Where was he? Where was everyone? What had just happened? Lifting his head up, he made out a figure wrapped in thick furs through the white wall of snow. Slowly, the figure approached him. Just before San's world went black, he was sure he saw the stranger in furs reaching for him. Pain. A searing, throbbing pain ignited in San's head as a light from somewhere teased him awake. He grimaced as he opened his eyes. Through the agony, he could make out a light brownish color. Not much else, though. The world was still spinning too much. San swallowed, doing his best not to throw up. What had just happened? As much as he racked his brain, he couldn't remember much. Just that 1 second he was surfing through the sky, and the next he was lying in the snow. As he continued to look through squinted eyes, the spinning stopped. The picture became clearer. The brown he saw was the roof of a wooden trailer. He turned his head to the side. He was wrapped in bright, shiny red blankets. That stranger had saved his life. Look, he woke up! San looked over and saw the crew standing over him. Jack Thunder, Frosty, Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, Snotter, and a kitsune he'd never seen before encircled the cot he lay on. Razor took his place on Jack Thunder's shoulder, also looking concerned. San sighed in relief. They had all made it. He tried to pull himself into a sitting position, but the splitting pain in his head forced it back onto the pillow. Don't strain yourself, sir. You got a pretty awful concussion out there. A concussion? That explained why he couldn't remember anything. He turned to Jack Thunder. What happened back there? The cloud crashed. Terry ran into some of the null magic from Mount Inferno, and we all fell and landed in the mountains, the Storm Gremlin replied. Terry? Where's Terry? Your friend is fine, the kitsune answered. He's actually in the other bed next to you. She and the others parted, revealing the orange-clad storm gremlin laying in a cot opposite his. Terry smiled and gave him a weak thumbs up. Kirami? Are you in here? The team backed up as another kitsune entered the trailer. She shook herself off before removing her furs. San immediately recognized her. She made her way up to the Tengu's bedside. Well, long time no see, San. Didn't expect us to see each other again like this. San chuckled. I could say the same for you, Altairia, though it seems you've been doing a lot better than I have. He stopped to take a rest. Thank you for saving us back there. Thank Kirami. She's the one who rescued you, Altairia replied as she motioned to the smaller kitsune. Nice to meet you, Kirami introduced herself. San smiled, despite himself. Excuse me, Terry Paradise interrupted. But have you seen whatever's going on at Mount Inferno? It's even worse than it was before. Altairia and Kirami both turned to face Terry. You saw it too? Terry nodded. That's why we're here. I surfed them all over here on a cloud. We would have been fine if I hadn't run straight into one of those bubbles. Bubbles? Kirami went over to the window facing Mount Inferno. To her shock, Terry was right. The smoke coming from Mount Inferno bubbled and boiled, looking more like black ink than smoke. There was no way that this was Grimhide's doing. All of a sudden, a beast with a horned skull for a head popped its head in through the window. Kirami jumped back in shock. A look of irritation crossed her face. Ruby, how many times have I told you not to do that? The skull-headed tiger mewed and motioned its head towards the mountain. Kirami sighed. I know, I saw it too. Ruby turned her glance towards Jack Thunder. He clasped onto Stormbringer a bit more tightly. He had never seen an Inferno cat up close before. Inferno cats tended to live in lands where fire magic was abundant, such as the jungle of the Wise Serpent. They took the form of great tigers with skull-like faces, brimstone fur, and flaring manes. And this one was focused on the staff in his hand, amber eyes shining faintly. What do you see now? Kirami turned her gaze towards Ruby's. Her eyes were drawn towards the trident-shaped staff in his hand. Was that really? The gemstone in the center filled the entire room with waves of eerie green light. Looking around, Kirami noticed that the staff wasn't the only thing that was glowing. The necklace around the reef siren's neck, the pink and maroon cannon the Nekomata carried, and the broad axe the fairy snail slung over her back were all pulsing with different colors of light. Kirami threw her hands up to shield her eyes. Meanwhile, Altairia gazed in wonder. She never expected that the strangers that came for a visit would have already collected 4 of the 6 fragments of Anima. Perhaps Anima thought it was time for fortune to smile down upon her and her charge. All of a sudden, the colors shifted. What was once a spectrum of green and blue and purple became a uniform scarlet glow. Wait, red. Isn't that the color of fire magic? Snotter asked. She was right. The fragments had sensed the presence of Yuuki. Altairia's stomach dropped. Yuuki was somewhere around Mount Inferno, but so were the Wendigos. She and the others would have to act quickly to find it before the Wendigos or the mountain's cold-blooded inhabitants could. With the flare of her magic, the trailer jolted to life. It began making its way down the mountainside, back towards the jungle. If she and Kirami were going to find Yuuki again, they would need those kids' help. Chapter 4. Welcome to the Jungle. San breathed a sigh of relief as he felt the road even out underneath him. The path down the mountain hadn't exactly been the smoothest, and every jolt from a stray rock made his head flare up in pain once more. But now that the trailer had made its way into the jungle, not only had the inside become nice and warm, but he could finally go to sleep. He turned his head to the side. Terry had already fallen asleep. San marveled at how he could fall asleep so easily on the road. Then again, he didn't have a concussion. Terry shivered in his sleep. San's memory flashed back to a few months ago. Jack Thunder had gotten null magic poisoning when a bolt of the unnatural energy struck him in the shoulder. The Tengu wondered if Terry had also been poisoned when he ran the cloud into the null magic bubble. That would explain why he was so sick. San rolled onto his back. He stared at the dark ceiling for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of rainforest birds and insects just outside. His eyelids drooped, and before long, he was out. Snotter sat up straight and tall on the back of the wagon. She didn't dare take her eyes off the scene in front of her. It didn't matter how calm and peaceful everything appeared to be. There was danger all around, and if it pounced, she would strike it down. In her hands, she could feel Terra pulsing faster every minute. The earthen broadaxe's glow still shone the same burning red as it did earlier. They were getting closer. Closer to Yuuki, and closer to danger. Snotter, you alright? You look awfully tense. Snotter didn't even look away. Not important, Buckthorn. I gotta watch for trouble. Buckthorn knew there was no point in arguing with the snail. This is what she'd been trained for. She turned around and went back inside. San and Terry were both asleep. Buckthorn made her way to Terry's side. He stirred, rolling over on his back. His eyes fluttered open. Buckthorn? Hey, how are you doing? He sighed. Ugh, could be better. Buckthorn could imagine. All the light seemed to have gone out of his eyes. She wondered if their crash into the null magic bubble had left him poisoned. She remembered how sick Jack Thunder was when she'd first met him. It took weeks in the hospital for him to recover from that. She looked about the cabin. Was there anything she could use to make a potion? She didn't see anything right offhand. All of a sudden, the trailer halted. Buckthorn could hear growling sounds from outside. Jack Thunder and the others hurried inside, slamming the back door behind them. What in Altairus is going on? Buckthorn hurried over to the window. When she saw what had alarmed the others, she ducked down, trying to make herself invisible. 2 lava dragon whelps with blackened scales darted past the wagon. Buckthorn heard a thump and a yell, followed by the sound of something dragging across the grass. The whelps, both the size of horses, flapped their wings, lifting their quarry off the ground. The one closest to them had sulfur-yellow veins between his scales, while the other's veins were a pinkish red. A harpy wearing an eye patch was thrashing and scrambling, trying to loosen herself from the whelp's grip. Her gray feathers were crushed and falling out. Before Buckthorn could wonder just what she had done to deserve to be imprisoned, the 2 whelps took flight, lifting her off the ground. From inside the wagon, Buckthorn could faintly hear their conversation. Ha! We gotcha! That should teach you not to try and escape again. She put up quite a fight back there. Is it just me, or did she get stronger too? Yeah, I noticed that. Probably something to do with that smog coming from the mountain. Do you think it's the Wendigos? Dunno. I didn't see any Wendigo slime coming from her mouth. The 2 voices abruptly paused. Buckthorn heard a distant grunt of frustration, then the sound of 2 pairs of wings flapping off into the distance. They were gone. It was a good minute before Jack Thunder and the others could relax their shoulders and breathe again. It ran in the storm gremlin's head over and over again. They had come this close to an encounter with a dangerous outlaw. If those 2 hadn't shown up... He shook his head. He shouldn't worry so much. When was the last time he'd failed? He remembered how he'd faced down Captain Blackheart in the Turquoise Archipelago. It was only him, Frosty, San, and Buckthorn. Not to mention, he had a banged-up shoulder during the battle. They still managed to beat her and get the Wendigos out of her system. Why did he think this would have been any different? San. He looked over to the bed where San was still asleep. He hadn't seemed to notice what had just happened at all. That crash landing we had must have really knocked him out, Jack Thunder thought. As the others went back outside to their posts, Jack Thunder and Razor stayed behind with Buckthorn. The storm gremlin took his post at the foot of San's bed. Razor jumped up on the bed and curled up atop San's chest. As Buckthorn resumed looking for herbs in the cabin, his gaze fell back on the Tengu. San opened his eyes. Through bleary vision, he recognized the form of the storm gremlin above him. He smiled. "What are you looking at me like that for, Jack? You didn't hear what just went on outside?" San sighed. "No, I think I fell asleep." "You didn't just hear that prisoner come within a hair of us?" Jack, don't shout, you'll make his headache worse, Buckthorn scolded, holding a bundle of herbs in her hand. Right, he sighed. Buckthorn came up next to him with a cold pack she'd prepared. She placed it on San's head. The Tengu relaxed, melting into the cot. That should help you feel better at least, Buckthorn thought. She turned to Terry. Now to take care of you. She took the herbs in her hand over to the counter and began grinding them into a powder. Buckthorn remembered how her mother made lay potions. She just needed silverleaf, aruberry, coca bark, and what? What was she forgetting? She stopped pounding the herbs in her mortar and looked out the window. There had to be something she wasn't remembering. But what was it? Interlude 1. The Legend of Yuuki. Altairia slowly opened her eyes. She stirred from her position on the floor. She had just come out of a 5-hour meditation session. Difficult as those were, she knew it was something she needed to do. Fire elementals weren't exactly known for keeping their tempers cool. That was what the meditations were for, to help them learn to control their passions. All the priests at the Temple of the Four Flames knew that this was the best way to train themselves to protect the flaming sword that the temple was built around. Altairia looked behind her. There it was. The others called it Yuuki, a katana sword with a golden blade and a hilt wrapped in red cloth. It burned and blazed with an orange flame. Red and yellow light filled the chamber. She inched closer to it. Yuuki floated in the air, surrounded in a column of softly glowing fire. Even from the distance she was at, she could feel the abundance of fire magic radiating from it. She only stood, not daring to touch it. The fire wasn't the issue. As a kitsune, she could reach into the flames without hurting herself. No, it was the curse. Everyone in the temple said that Yuuki was cursed. That if one were to touch the katana, one would be doomed to 1,000 years of suffering. Altairia wasn't sure if that was true. It sounded like something the high priest made up to keep it from being stolen. That was what she worried about. Yuuki powered this entire temple. If someone were to come in here and steal it, who knows what they would do with it. She could tell that the sword could burn down a forest the size of Mischief Mire at the very least with just one swing. She sighed. It didn't help that the Temple of the Four Flames was smack dab in the middle of Nekomata country. Though the temple was warm and full of life, a land full of chilly mists and whispering winds awaited her just outside the door, such as it was in the Nekomata Islands. She didn't trust those two-tailed felines one bit. Kitsune and Nekomata were never friendly with one another. She remembered hearing stories about Nekomata stealing powerful magical artifacts from Kitsune and burning down entire villages with them just for sport. Or about how Nekomata would kidnap Kitsune kids and subject them to the worst kinds of dark magic experiments. Deep down, Altairia knew that most of the Nekomata around here would probably never do that, but she was still wary. She dared not leave the temple unless it was really necessary. Altairia? Are you alright? Altairia turned to the source of the voice. It was another priestess in the temple, one by the name of Inari of Foxfire. They had been friends since childhood and had even opted to apply for priesthood together. It was a happy accident that they both ended up in the Temple of the Four Flames. Inari looked at Altairia. Beautiful, isn't it? Yep, truly a marvel of creation. Inari cocked her head. What's up with you? You seem different. Altairia turned to Inari. Ah, it's nothing. You're worried about those Nekomata, aren't you? Altairia's face fell. Inari always knew what she was thinking. Don't worry. I don't think they'll dare come in here. Not with the curse and all. Altairia just nodded. She followed Inari out of the chamber. Inari was right. The Nekomata wouldn't come in here. But her sense of foreboding didn't vanish. Something told her the curse wouldn't be enough. Chapter 5 Mount Inferno. Shadowpaws stared down at his feet. He was still wearing the boots the Elder Goat had given him for the Winter Solstice. I still don't get it. How are these supposed to make me braver? The Nekomata sighed and swallowed hard. He wished that the Elder Goat had just granted his wish for courage. He was scared out of his mind right now. Riding a trailer driven by a complete stranger through a snake-infested jungle to retrieve a flaming sword that may or may not be in the belly of a dead volcano used as a prison would rack anyone's nerves. Shadowpaws, being the scaredy cat he was, could barely even move from his seat at the back of the wagon. Every inch the trailer moved felt like another step on a death march. That's exactly what this is. A death march. The trailer jolted to a stop. Hesitating for a moment, Shadowpaws hopped off the back. He made his way around to the front of the trailer, Snotter and Kirami following close behind. Slowly, he lifted his head, knowing exactly what he would see. Before him stood a winding path cut into lava rock. It twisted and turned upon itself to the top of Mount Inferno, which loomed over him like an evil overlord's dark tower. That's what Shadowpaws thought of anyway. There may have been no wicked sorcerer at the top of this tower, but there was someone just as dark and imposing. Why does Yuuki have to be this close to Mount Inferno? The Nekomata wondered. The last thing he wanted was to get fried alive by an angered lava dragon. Altairia was the last to emerge from the wagon. You all go up ahead. I'm going to stay back and make sure San and the other one are alright. Him and the others nodded. Buckthorn looked a little disappointed, but she turned and made her way up the trail nonetheless. Frosty led the charge up the mountain while Jack Thunder followed close behind. Shadowpaws wondered how Frosty was able to find the courage to lead the way. Ice didn't exactly hold up against fire, and yet she soldiered on, no trace of emotion on her face. Slowly but surely, they made their way up the mountain. With every step, the Nekomata's urge to turn tail and run grew stronger. Now he could clearly see the cloud of smoke up close. It was not so much a cloud as it was a bubbling, filthy mass of inky, null magic spraying out of the top of the volcano. Terry was right. This was no smoke. No fire elemental could ever make something like this. At last, they had reached the cave entrance. Shadowpaws gaped. It was huge. The only thing he could think of that was close to the top of its entrance was an ancient redwood tree he'd seen in the Mystic Wood. And if the entrance was that big... Shadowpaws gulped. Grimhide probably wasn't much smaller. Razor bounded ahead of Frosty and began sniffing the ground. It was then that Jack Thunder, Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, and Snotter realized their anima fragments had lit up once more. Their bright red sheen meant only one thing. The fire fragment was somewhere nearby. Jack Thunder poked his head into the cave entrance. He waved Stormbringer around, trying to get a sense of where Yuuki was. The staff pulsed even faster, telling him he was headed in the right direction. He motioned for the rest of the team to follow. Going by the light coming from Stormbringer and the sound of Razor's sniffing, the team stuck close together in the dark. They couldn't see much, but Jack Thunder spotted a smaller hole in the wall standing opposite the cave entrance. Strange and pitiful moans could be heard coming from it. That must be where the dungeon begins. Now remember, we must be careful in here. It's not just Grimhide we need to worry about. We never know what we might find in... Frosty stopped short. Jack Thunder turned to where she was looking. He nearly dropped Stormbringer when he saw. A gout of flame burst from the shaded figure's nostrils, illuminating its face. It would have been intimidating by its sheer size alone, but its fiery red eyes and blackened scales only scared them even more. Jack Thunder instinctively thrust his staff towards the figure, but he knew it would do no good against the dragon sitting in front of him now. Grimhide had caught them. Another burst of flame shot from Grimhide's mouth. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Jack Thunder jumped back, thrusting Stormbringer's blades towards the lava dragon. "We're here for Yuuki. Where is it?" "Jack, you're just making things worse," Buckthorn scolded the storm gremlin. She stepped forward. "We're sorry. We don't mean to intrude, but Altairia told us that the fire fragment was somewhere in these caves. We need it for our quest. Do you know where it is?" That's when Grimhide recognized the artifacts the kids were carrying. Stormbringer, the Sea Stone, Lethal Joke, and Terra all had a scarlet aura surrounding them. He took a deep breath. "I found Yuuki in the jungle of the Wise Serpent sometime after the war ended. I keep it down in the deepest part of the mountain. I cannot allow you down there. It is far too dangerous." He rose to his feet. Jack Thunder stepped forward. "But you just saw our fragments. What makes you think we can't handle a few nasties?" Grimhide moved to block their way, his expression hardening. "They're not just nasties. Even with the anima fragments, there is no guarantee that you'll make it out alive. I'm not allowing a group of children to risk their lives on this fool's errand." He dipped his head to push them out of the cave. Jack Thunder's blood boiled. "Children? Okay, that tears it. I'm going down there whether you let me or not. I'll go under your feet if I have to." "Jack, no!" It was too late. The storm gremlin had charged headfirst into the black, past Grimhide and through the entrance to the deeper levels of the cave. Frosty facepalmed for only a second before running after him. The rest of the team followed suit. Grimhide peered through the hole Jack Thunder went through. It was far too small to fit him. He grumbled to himself. This was one of the many downsides of being so huge. Now he couldn't even follow them down to make sure they were all right. As he pulled his head out of the opening, he spotted Goliath and Gilgamesh flapping their wings above his head. They had seen what had just happened. Grimhide pulled his head out of the hole. Seeing their chance, the two whelps flew through it in hot pursuit of the little storm gremlin and his friends. Grimhide sat back on his haunches. That foolish storm gremlin. He just had to do something like that, didn't he? At least those two whelps were after him. They knew the dungeon better than anybody, himself included. Hopefully they could reach the young heroes before Jack's stubborn pride got them all killed. Chapter 6 Dungeon of Despair. Jack Thunder rushed down the spiral stairway of the dungeon, not daring to look back. The nerve of that dragon, suggesting he was too young. He'd show him. He charged headlong into the dark, down the narrow tower he found himself in. He didn't care about the moans and groans all around him. It was only when he was sure Grimhide couldn't follow him that he allowed his run to slow to a careful walk. As he listened, a chill ran down his spine. Uh-oh, maybe I shouldn't have been so brash. He couldn't see anything except for what the dim red light from his staff illuminated just in front of him. Even so, he could tell he was hardly alone. Where were the others? Did they follow him? "Jackie, there you are!" A chorus of footsteps approached him from above. Soon, he could see Frosty standing over him in the dim. She wore an unamused expression. "I really can't believe you sometimes. Just charging down into a dungeon without a second thought. You're lucky I haven't—" "Frosty!" Kirami hissed. "Not so loud. The prisoners can hear you." "Huh?" Frosty turned around to see the kitsune glaring up at her. Shadowpaws, Buckthorn, and Snotter stood beside her, looking concerned. The din had faded to an eerie silence. "Maybe we should just go," Snotter whispered. The team made their way down the stairs, each one of them clutching the fragments of anima tightly. Cold dread washed over Frosty. She glanced around, expecting something to jump on them any minute. Still no sound save for the echo of their footsteps against stone and the hum and pulse of the anima fragments. A pulse that grew ever so slightly faster as the team descended the stairs. Finally, Jack Thunder made his way to yet another opening. The dungeon suddenly opened up as he passed through it. He couldn't see much, but he could see that the walls of the cavern were lined with row upon row of stalagmites emerging from the ground. A lot like the ones he'd seen inside the cave where he'd found Stormbringer, except these stretched all the way to the ceiling and sat in a uniform row. Out of the blackness behind the stalagmites, pairs upon pairs of glowing eyes of all colors stared back at Jack Thunder. He realized what these rocks were supposed to do. They were bars, prison bars to hold the dangerous outlaws in. He staggered back as a claw shot out at him. It managed to graze his cheek, slicing through it. It didn't hurt too much, but when he put his hand up to his cheek and looked at it in the dim light, he noticed a dark liquid on his glove. A blast of freezing energy blew past his head and struck the attacker straight in the chest. A fierce cry echoed through the chamber before a thunk sounded, the outlaw having been encased in ice. Jack Thunder looked behind him to see a fuming Frosty, icy energy swirling around her hands. He didn't need to tell the others to stay away from the bars. They already knew. Through narrow hallways, they made their way through the maze of the dungeon. All they had to guide them was the dim red light from their anima fragments. Over uneven pathways, past aggressive monsters, and through many twists and turns, the fragments began to pulse faster and faster. Jack Thunder wiped the sweat from his brow. This wasn't easy, but at least he knew they were getting closer. Hopefully, they would reach Yuuki before those bars broke. He didn't know how long they would last with all the outlaws constantly throwing themselves against them. He could already hear the sound of stone cracking. Even more were yelling things at them that he would definitely get in trouble for repeating. The storm gremlin couldn't help but think of who they must have been before they came down here. True, they were dangerous, but the years spent down there had made them borderline feral. He wondered what kind of good this was supposed to do. Was that the plan all along? Just to throw them away? Never to see the light of day again? Finally, Jack Thunder made his way to a fork in the road. The path split three ways, left, right, and straight ahead. Jack Thunder stood in the center and rotated Stormbringer around from left to right. The staff's pulses became stronger as he rotated towards the center path, then faded as he reached the rightmost path. He turned back to the center. Alright then, I guess it's down this way. He motioned for the others to follow. Unbeknownst to him, two lava dragon whelps were watching him, perched atop two of the sky-high stalagmites. They paled when they saw where he was headed. Titania's chamber? One of them whisper-yelled to the other. This was bad. This was really bad. Of all the villains in the dungeons, Titania was the worst of them all. She used to be the queen of the butterflies, ruling alongside her husband, King Oberon. For many years their rule was peaceful. However, Titania grew ever more paranoid as the years wore on. No matter how harmonious things were, she couldn't stop thinking that her citizens were conspiring against her. One day, her madness came to a head. A visiting human had made the mistake of falling asleep in Titania's garden, something that Titania saw as a threat. It was late at night and no one else was around. Goliath and Gilgamesh retched at the memory. Titania had eaten the human, cooked her into soup and served her to the nobility. She thought it would be a warning to them, a warning of what would happen if they dared to betray her. King Oberon had Titania banished to the deepest level of Mount Inferno when he found out. He just didn't know what else to do with her. He vanished soon after, and the kingdom crumbled in his absence. It was only when the blacksmith by the name of Rosie took the crown by force that the kingdom, or princessdom rather, was restored to its original glory. The kingdom thereby became known as the Rosie Princessdom, located just off the coast of Pandora. The two whelps knew that Titania would put up a considerable fight. Stone stalactite bars weren't enough to hold her. They had to hold her in place with chains made of cold iron, the one material that was immune to fairy magic. No matter how much she struggled, she was unable to break them. But if she somehow managed to get them off, they took flight once more, following close behind the young heroes. Chapter 7: Queen of the Butterflies. Finally, Jack Thunder and his crew had reached the end of the tunnel. This was definitely the place. Stormbringer and the other fragments of anima lit up the entire room with their fierce magical glow. Looking around, Jack Thunder couldn't see much. The room was shaped in a perfect cube, save for the ceiling high above. The walls were plain and uniform. In the center of the room was an unknown figure crumpled on the floor. As he stepped forward, he heard a clinking noise under his feet. Looking down, he saw a thin iron chain snaking its way loosely across the floor. Many more extended like tree roots out from the figure, keeping it in place. He froze, expecting the figure to jump at him. When it didn't, he sighed in relief. Yuuki had to be around here somewhere. Jack Thunder, Frosty, Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, Snotter, and Kirami spread out across the room, taking care not to step on the chains. The last thing they wanted was to awaken the prisoner in the center of the room. They held their fragments to the wall, scanning them for any sign of the fiery sword. Kirami scanned the walls, looking for any sort of button or switch that might reveal where Yuuki would be. She grunted to herself. This would be a lot easier if the light coming from the anima fragments wasn't this dim red color. She could hardly see a thing in this gloom. After some time, the kitsune found a stone in the walls that had a slightly darker color than the rest of them. Could it be? She placed her paw on the stone and pushed it. To her surprise, it receded into the wall. A sudden scraping noise made her jump and turn her gaze upward. The stone just above the one she'd pressed moved out of the way to reveal a small gap in the wall, one with a strong orange glow emerging from it. With a small hop, Kirami crawled into the narrow space. She gaped as she saw the source of the orange glow more clearly. A handle covered in velvet red cloth sat before her, the handle of a katana. She reached in and grabbed it with some effort. Slipping out of the gap, she got a chance to look at the sword she'd pulled out. Red and orange flames flickered around the tip, illuminating the katana's golden blade. All of a sudden, it began to glow white. So did the fragments of anima. The light threatened to blind them as it filled the whole room. Altairia wasn't wrong. Yuuki had been down here all this time. All of a sudden, the six of them could hear the rattling of chains. They whipped around to face the source of the noise. The figure that had once been lying on the floor was now standing up straight. Its eyes, no, her eyes, stared straight in Kirami's direction. That's when Kirami realized. Titania? All those years in the dungeon had not been kind to the former queen of the butterflies. Thin, haggard, and tangled in chains, Titania looked just like any other common thief. Kirami wouldn't have realized she was royalty if she didn't know better. Titania glowered at her with sickly blue eyes before lunging at her. The iron chain snapped taut. Titania fell forward, screeching and struggling. Golden sparks flickered around her hands as she tried to use her magic. To no avail. The chains kept her firmly under wraps. Kirami sighed in relief. Titania was no threat to them. Or at least that's what she thought. All of a sudden, tiny black blobs began to rise from Titania's body. Slithering around the chains, they coated the iron in a slick black film. Kirami and the others stared in horror as the cuff around Titania's left arm came loose and slipped off. With her left hand now free, Titania's arm swarmed with black butterflies. All the black blobs fell to the floor and began circling around her. They soon took form. More butterflies made from null magic exploded from the ground, swarming the heroes. Jack Thunder was the first to act. A bolt of green lightning blasted from Stormbringer's blades, scattering the cloud of butterflies. Still they swarmed, trying to engulf Kirami and the others. Kirami snorted. There was no way she was going to fall to a bunch of butterflies. Yuuki blazed with new life as the kitsune slashed her way through the cloud. She could hear small screeches as the foul insects fell to the ground, their wings alight. She felt something bump into her. Turning around, Kirami noticed Snotter behind her. The fairy snail was also slashing at the butterflies, splitting some in half. Here, this should help you. Terra flashed green, and Kirami felt renewed. As the two slashed their way through the swarm, the others were doing their part. Blasts of chilling frost, bright lightning bolts, laughing gas, and siren songs filled the room as everyone slowly wore the swarm down. With every second, though, Titania came closer to slipping her bonds. Both of her hands had come loose and were summoning more of those cursed insects. Kirami huffed and puffed. They were giving it everything they had, but would it be enough to outlast Titania? As soon as she had that thought, Titania slipped the last of her bonds. Now completely free, the former queen charged at the kitsune. Kirami just managed to jump out of the way in time for Titania to slip in a puddle of Wendigo substance and crash to the floor behind her. Undeterred, Titania whipped around and summoned another swarm. All of a sudden, a blast of fire struck Titania out of nowhere. She shrieked as it burned her. Looking up, Kirami saw two lava dragon whelps circling the air above them. Grimhide's young had come for them. And even better, she knew that fire was effective against Titania. She took a deep breath and concentrated hard. The flame at the tip of Yuuki grew bigger and bigger until it enveloped the sword's blade. In seconds, she engulfed the whole room in flames. She held the others close to her, shielding them from the fire. Through the blaze, Kirami could see Titania shriveling up like a leaf in the sun. Her butterflies shrieked and popped like corn, splattering her face in black ink. Eventually, the flames died down. Kirami huffed and puffed as she got her sight back. Titania had collapsed to the ground once again, completely spent. The butterflies were reduced to black drips covering the floor. Their tiny white eyes stared up at her as they slithered back into the recesses of the walls. Interlude 2. Altairia and the Fire Sword. Altairia slammed the door shut behind her. She could only hope those monsters couldn't get in. She knew she was taking a risk by going into the village. Nekomata weren't exactly friendly with kitsune after all. But the threat she faced now was not from the Nekomata at all. Instead, she had been chased back to the temple by shadowy black figures whose forms flowed like water. Altairia had never seen a Wendigo before, but she could recognize them from the tales. What was even worse was that the entire village had turned to a sterile, colorless shelf of itself in their presence. It was only a matter of time before they got in the temple. Altairia could only thank Anima that the rest of the priests weren't here. Those demons were bad enough with Nekomata magic at their disposal. She didn't want to think about what would happen if they could control fire. Altairia's eyes landed on Yuuki. The sword was still suspended in a column of flame. The kitsune got a wild idea, one that would potentially leave her cursed. At the very least, the entire priesthood would scold her if they knew of this idea. Still, it was the only one she had. She stepped up to the column. Without hesitation, she snatched Yuuki from its holder. The sword glowed a wild orange in her hands, the tip of it blazing with a potent flame. Her hands trembled as she positioned it in front of her. It was a bit heavier than she thought. She didn't feel any sort of curse descend on her, though. Guess it really was something that the High Priest made up, Altairia thought. There was no time to lose. Gripping Yuuki tight, Altairia burst out the front door. Immediately, the shadow demons set upon her. Wooden boxes, trailers, Nekomata technology of all sorts were wrapped in a fiendish red glow as they sprang to life and rushed towards her. With one swipe of the sword, Altairia cleaved a questing carriage in half, sending the burning pieces crashing to the ground. Not satisfied, the Wendigos sent bigger and bigger machines after Altairia. Unfortunately for the demons, all of those machines were made out of wood. Every time they sent one to attack, Altairia would incinerate it with Yuuki's flames. Finally, the Wendigos grew impatient and charged. Altairia could feel Yuuki growing warmer as its glow became hotter. Now it was almost blue. Swinging it in front of her, she released a torrent of blue flame straight from the tip of the katana. Altairia could only hear shrieks before the flame cut out. When it did, she saw the Wendigos fleeing towards the horizon. Sheathing Yuuki to her back, the kitsune made her way through town. There was quite a bit of collateral damage. About half of the wagons and machines the Nekomata had were sitting in cinders behind her, victims to the invasion. Thankfully, though, that was the most of it. Nekomata of all colors poked their heads out from their homes or from the wreckage, looking to see if the invasion was over. Altairia went around town, using the magic within the sword to restore the villagers' anima. She even came across a couple of Nekomata that had been poisoned with null magic. She burned away the foul substance using Yuuki's fire. While the High Priest didn't exactly approve of her using the fire sword in the temple to vanquish the threat, he came around to realize it was necessary. Not long after the invasion, Altairia was approached by a certain Pure Eternus. The youth demigod enchanted Altairia with a story of how they surrendered their youthful magic to create the Fragment of Light, Excalibur. They explained how they were on a mission to defeat the Heart of Darkness and restore the world to its former glory. Of course, Altairia jumped at the opportunity. Not long after, she met the others: San, Mallow, Adamant, and Strombolio. Fairies of all elements and all stripes on the same quest. The 6 of them would stick together no matter what. Chapter 8. It's Not Over. Jack Thunder and the others stared at Titania's crumpled form for far too long. The storm gremlin was desperately trying to catch his breath. These battles kept getting crazier and crazier. First a giant tornado, then a siren sea captain, then a mutated roller coaster, then a false dryad, and now an evil queen who shot butterflies out of her hands. This was more adventure and strangeness than he'd ever seen before in his life, and that was saying something considering he lived in Altairus. All of a sudden, 2 horse-sized figures descended from above. 2 dragons with blackened scales and glowing veins. They glared at Jack Thunder, annoyed. "Boy, have you got some explaining to do," Goliath, the one on the right with sulfur yellow veins, exclaimed. "You can say that again. What made you think that going after the Fragment of Fire by yourself was a good idea?" Gilgamesh demanded to know, his pinkish veins glowing like the sun. The storm gremlin was at a loss for words. He hadn't been thinking at all. Kirami spoke up. "You're the ones who stepped in for us." Goliath nodded. "We kept Yuuki inside Titania's chamber for a reason. Her powers are no match for fire. She can't even touch it without it burning her, and we figured it would be safe in the deepest level of this mountain." "Speaking of which," Gilgamesh continued, "you still haven't answered our question. What were you doing going after the—" He stopped when he saw the anima fragments. Stormbringer, the Sea Stone, Lethal Joke, Terra, and Yuuki all glowed simultaneously in a rainbow of colors. Frosty stepped forward. "We're on an important mission. Jack may have been a bit rash, but there is an important reason why we went after Yuuki. Surely you've heard of it too?" The two dragons' eyes glinted with recognition. Now they understood. It was no wonder the little storm gremlin was so insistent on finding the fire fragment. They were still a bit annoyed, though. They gestured for the team to get on their backs. Jack Thunder, Frosty, and Snotter jumped on Gilgamesh's back, while Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, and Kirami took their seat on Goliath's. With a whoosh, they flew out of the cave, high above the stalactite bars and the winding tunnels. Jack Thunder marveled at how complex the dungeon's design was. He couldn't really appreciate it from the ground, but now that he was in the air, he saw the many paths and cells winding like so many blood vessels. His hands shot out to cover his eyes as the dark of the cave gave way to a blinding light. He uncovered his eyes to see that they were circling the top of Mount Inferno. The sun was setting slowly, lazy and orange in the distance. How did I not see Grimhide on the way out? He wondered. There, I believe that's your trailer down there? Gilgamesh asked. Jack Thunder nodded. The two took a nosedive towards the trailer. For a second, it seemed like they were going to crash straight into the ground. But at the last moment, they pulled up slightly, gently touching down. The young heroes hopped off their backs one by one. Kirami waved to the two as they flew away. Thanks for getting us out of there! She thought she could hear them shouting back, but she wasn't sure. Kirami? Kirami, you're back! Thank Anima! Kirami turned to see Altairia running at her. The older kitsune looked a bit more haggard than she did that morning. We got Yuuki, she showed Altairia her sword. How are the two in the wagon doing? Altairia's face fell. That's what I was running up to talk to you about. Sounds better, but the other one, well, he's not getting worse, but he's not getting better either. Not one of the potions I tried on him did anything to help with his exhaustion. I think Buckthorn and Sand were right about him having no magic poisoning. She smiled. Which means it's a good thing that you've got Yuuki now. Kirami knew what Altairia was talking about. If she remembered correctly, one of Yuuki's powers was to burn away disease, including no magic poisoning. It wouldn't be pleasant for Terry, but it would definitely help him heal. She made her way inside the trailer. San was sitting up, reading a book. He looked over when he heard the younger kitsune approaching. He pointed to the cot directly beside his where Terry was sleeping. Terry Paradise didn't look too good. His once lavender skin had faded to a pale gray. Even the sunburn on his cheeks seemed to have vanished. He groaned as he stirred, smiling at Kirami when he saw her. Don't worry. This'll hurt a bit, but it'll help. She brought Yuuki out in front of her. The fire sword glowed with a brilliant orange light before bursting into a bright red flame that engulfed the storm gremlin. Terry resisted the urge to scream. All the tissues in his body flared up with fresh, boiling pain. Even so, he could feel the null magic melting away, the flames purifying his body. Suddenly, the pain stopped. Terry found the strength to sit up in his cot. He came face to face with Kirami. Thank you. Yeah, don't mention it. She turned away, suddenly a bit uncomfortable. He was just staring at her with those big eyes, very intensely. He paused. So, do you live around here? Yeah. I mean, me and Altairia have been traveling across Carkea, but we just now got here, so I guess you could say that. Cool. He stared down at his hands. Me and Jack live on Tempest Island. Maybe you've seen it before. Is that the big cloud with the purple mountain? Kirami thought she'd seen it a few times. That's it! Terry jumped a little in surprise at how loud his voice was. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. He was sweating buckets, and it wasn't because of the heat. Alright, Terry, just play it cool. He took a deep breath. I actually found this place while I was cloud surfing. He sighed. That's how I got poisoned, actually. I ran into one of the bubbles coming from Mount Inferno. Buckthorn suddenly came in. She looked over at Terry. Oh good, it worked! She glanced back and forth between Terry and Kirami. She smirked. Kirami put her paws up. It's not what it looks like. Are you sure about that? The three of them looked over to see San sitting up in his bed, smirking. Buckthorn cackled. Kirami's face couldn't get any redder. Chapter 9. A Volcanic Temper. The early morning sun had arrived. A beam of sunlight made its way through the trailer window, teasing Kirami awake. The white fox stirred, her eyes adjusting to the inside of the cabin. She must have fallen asleep on the floor. At least someone was nice enough to give her a blanket and pillow. She made her way to the window and looked outside. The others were fast asleep, cocooned in their sleeping bags. Razor and Ruby were curled up next to each other, the weather wyvern resting up against the Inferno cat as if she were a cushion. Hey, you're awake! How'd you sleep? Kirami looked down to see Terry Paradise still resting on his cot. He rolled over onto his side and smiled at her. You look like you're feeling better. Yeah, I am. Thanks for what you did last night. Terry wrenched himself into a sitting position. By the way, how did you get Yuuki? Was it really inside Mount Inferno? Terry leaned in, suddenly excited. Kirami nodded. Grimhide hid it in the deepest part of the mountain. Long story. I would love to tell you over breakfast. Terry leapt out of the bed, stretching his muscles. He and San followed Kirami out of the wagon. So you really faced off against Titania? That Titania? Terry was hanging on to Kirami's every word. I think I heard the story of Titania back when I was a hatchling, San interjected. But I never really saw it as something real. I kind of thought of it more as a legend. His gaze trailed down to his plate. Ruby had helped them get breakfast that morning by chasing down an antelope she found in the foothills. The chunks of meat reminded him too much of the human who had suffered and died from Titania's madness. He didn't feel so hungry anymore. The others didn't seem to mind too much. Shadowpaws in particular seemed to like what they were having. The Nekomata had already finished his portion and was now licking the plate with his barbed cat tongue. As the rest of them ate and talked, San couldn't help but notice something coming from the mountain just behind them. He slunk away while the others were distracted. He could swear that it looked like a trickle of black ink trailing down the mountain. As he got closer, he got a better look at it. Yes, this was definitely Wendigo mass. It was black and sticky, and it flowed from a crack in the side of the mountain, pooling at San's feet. San heard a crack, and the trickle turned to a flow. A river of null magic pushed its way through the crack, widening it and cascading down the mountain like a waterfall. San just barely jumped out of the way, flapping his wings frantically as he took flight. From his vantage point, he could see similar black waterfalls erupting from all sides of the mountain. Altairia, who had heard San shout and turned around, rushed the rest of the team inside the wagon. Even Ruby crammed herself in, Razor perched on her back. San made his way to the window. Seeing Jack Thunder, he shouted, I need you to levitate this wagon with your magic. The ground isn't going to last long at this rate. Jack Thunder obeyed. Stormbringer flashed green, and all of a sudden, Altairia's trailer hovered above the ground, far above the tide of black magic. We need to go up to see Grimhide. I have a feeling he's in trouble. I'll lead the way, you just follow me. San once again shouted before darting off towards Mount Inferno. Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, Snotter, and Kirami's anima fragments all lit up, directing the trailer towards Mount Inferno's peak. The rest of them held on tight. It was even worse than before. Terry stared in horror at the scene before him. The entire mountain was erupting black wendigo substance non-stop. The black ink bubbled out of the top, spilling over the side and painting the mountain the color of sickness. It was sickness. Pure disease gushing out of the top of Mount Inferno and frothing up into the sky. It made him nauseous. All of a sudden, two familiar faces swooped in from above. Oh, thank Anima you're all right. We sought you out as soon as the flooding started. Kirami made her way to the window. What happened? Where's Grimhide? That's why we tried to find you. Our father's not well. He's... A bellowing roar shook the trailer, threatening to take it out of the sky. As Goliath and Gilgamesh parted, Kirami and her friends could finally get a look at the lava dragon emerging from the cave. He didn't look so good. His scales were slick with that horrible substance, darkening the once healthy fire glow his scales and wings gave off. On his face was a confused and disoriented expression, like he didn't know where he was. But he could sense the presence of the anima fragments inside Altairia's wagon, and they filled him with terror. He roared once again, shaking the earth. Shadowpaws managed to get to the window. The Nekomata's terror faded when he looked into Grimhide's eyes. "Help me," the lava dragon silently begged. "I don't know how, but please do something." Shadowpaws sat back down on the bed. He clasped Lethal Joke to his chest, wondering what to do. His thoughts were interrupted when a beam of flame came headed straight for the trailer. Seconds before impact, a shield of water rose out of the depths and blocked it. Buckthorn stood there, panting. The sea stone blazed with indigo fire. San was still outside, flitting this way and that to try and distract Grimhide. Altairia directed the counterattack, shouting directions to the rest of the team. Frosty put out the fires that sprung up here and there with her ice magic. Snotter and Kirami were helping Jack Thunder with the levitation spell. Terra and Yuuki glowed alongside Stormbringer. Wait. Levitation. Shadowpaws looked down at his boots. The boots that granted him super speed. If Jack Thunder could levitate the wagon... This is such a bad idea, the Nekomata thought to himself. But sitting there and doing nothing was worse. Legs shaking, he hopped off the bed and made his way towards Jack Thunder. Chapter 10. Shadowpaws Shines. Jack? Jack! Can you hear me? The storm gremlin turned towards Shadowpaws. The former's arms trembled, threatening to drop his staff as sweat poured down his forehead. Yeah, what is it? He asked breathlessly. I know this sounds crazy, but I need you to cast that levitation spell on me. I've got an idea for how I can turn things around. Jack Thunder paled, realizing what Shadowpaws was going to do. You're not really going out there, are you? The Nekomata nodded. But if you go out there, Grimhide will... he will... Shadowpaws pointed down to his boots. Don't worry, I got these. They're supposed to help with my courage problem, remember? Jack Thunder hesitated. He wasn't exactly reassured. But there weren't any other good options, so he pointed Stormbringer at Shadowpaws. Green sparks floated around Shadowpaws as he began to float in the air. Thanks, Jack. Wish me luck. He saluted the storm gremlin before making his way out of the back of the wagon. Shadowpaws grasped Lethal Joke tightly. Well, here goes nothing. Before he could change his mind, he ran straight for Grimhide. His magic boots allowed him to dash on the air itself, as if he were flying. It wasn't long before the lava dragon spotted him and a column of flame shot from his mouth. Shadowpaws banked upwards to dodge the flame. He circled Grimhide, flying in a crazed zigzag to keep from being burned alive. Even so, the edge of the flames kissed the tips of his twin tails, threatening to set them alight. The stench of burned fur filled his nostrils. Eventually, though, Shadowpaws drew close enough to launch an attack. Taking careful aim, he fired 3 smoke bombs at Grimhide's face. They exploded upon impact, blanketing it in laughing gas. Grimhide hesitated for a second. All of a sudden, he began giggling uncontrollably. His eyes rolled all around, unable to focus on his target. The gas had completely confused him. Kirami and Snotter saw what Shadowpaws was doing from the window. They both nodded their way towards Jack Thunder. He understood and cast the levitation spell once again. They hopped onto Ruby's back and ran after Shadowpaws. Side by side, they did their part. Snotter swung Terra towards Grimhide's mouth. A net of vines shot out of the axe and snared Grimhide's mouth shut. The dragon whipped his head from side to side, not understanding why he couldn't open his mouth anymore. That's when Kirami leapt in. Ruby matched Shadowpaw's speed as they charged towards the lava dragon. Remembering how effective Yuuki was against Terry's null magic poisoning, Kirami charged up its disease-burning spell. The flames from the sword snaked around the lava dragon, wrapping him in a healing blaze. He retched as Wendigo substance began to trickle out of his nostrils and mouth. The three of them purged the Wendigo from Grimhide's body bit by bit. Shadowpaw kept him disoriented with laughing gas, while Snotter and Kirami both charged up Terra and Yuki's disease-healing spells, expelling the foul liquid from Grimhide's body. Meanwhile, Jack Thunder and Buckthorn did their part from inside the wagon. They directed the trailer towards the cave entrance, hoping to get closer to their adversary. San had the same idea. He made a beeline straight for Grimhide, getting on top of the dragon's head and yanking his finned ears to distract him from the young heroes healing him. Eventually, the vines around Grimhide's mouth snapped. The three heroes braced themselves for another breath of flame. However, rather than attacking, Grimhide hunched over and began to heave. Oceans of horrible black fluid gushed from his mouth, coating the entire side of Mount Inferno like dripping syrup on the world's worst stack of pancakes. It didn't last long, though. As soon as it appeared, it rolled harmlessly down the side of the mountain, sinking into the sea. The Wendigo mass seeping from the mountain itself stopped flowing too. The bubbling smoke from the top of the mountains disappeared. The puddles and pools that were left scurried away across the ground towards the horizon. All that was left was a single figure kneeling in the muck before them as they touched down on the ground. One with a goat skull for a head and a gray and red cape. Nemesis! Jack Thunder and Buckthorn clambered out of the back of the wagon and brandished their fragments. That Wendigo just didn't know when to quit. As he and the others got close, though, they noticed something strange. Nemesis wasn't moving. Not attacking, not fleeing, just sitting there. The red glow in its eyes had faded to a rusty brown. Jack Thunder moved closer. Nemesis still didn't budge. Not even when the Storm Gremlin went right up next to it, shoving Stormbringer's blades right in its face. It was as if the Wendigo General had lost all will to fight. Well, aren't you going to say anything? San snapped at Nemesis. Still no response. Jack Thunder backed away a bit. This had never happened before. Nemesis had gone through all this trouble, and now it was just giving up? Just do it, Jack. Jack Thunder staggered back, startled. Go ahead. Banish me. I'm no match for 5 anima fragments. Just get it over with. The Storm Gremlin cocked his head. Was this some kind of trick? He looked back towards San and Altairia. The two of them seemed just as surprised as he was. Looking around at his teammates, he could see that they were just as clueless. Even Razor and Ruby looked perplexed. Then another possibility entered his mind. He remembered one of his Razor comics. In it, Razor, the Storm Gremlin from his wall poster, had cornered his arch-nemesis Professor Breezy. Breezy began taunting Razor, encouraging the hero to strike at him. What Razor didn't know was that Professor Breezy had a machine behind him which, when Razor struck him down, would activate, destroying all of Cyclone City. Luckily, Razor saw through the trick and didn't take the bait. Was Nemesis trying to pull something like that? He backed away slightly, still focusing Stormbringer on Nemesis. Why do you want us to banish you so badly? What's going to happen to us if we do? He snapped. Nothing. Nothing's going to happen. I just might as well make this easier on you. Since when do you care about us? Snotter growled. Come on, Jack, let's just banish this freak. Jack Thunder nodded hesitantly. Something about this still didn't seem right. The 5 young heroes lined up, pointing the fragments of anima towards Nemesis. Back to the flip side with you and your hate. You have no place in this land of dreams. We belong to Altairus. Altairus is ours. Now be gone. It was over surprisingly quickly. A spark of white light and a luminescent rainbow briefly flashed before their eyes before it faded. When their sight came back, Nemesis was no longer there. A small explosion sounded overhead. Their work was done. Chapter 11. The Key to Salvation. Grimhide laid his head down. It was finally over. Mr. Grimhide, are you alright? Grimhide's eyes snapped open. In his left eye, he could see a storm gremlin with a sunburned face and a mango-colored jumpsuit. Goliath and Gilgamesh took their places at each of his sides. His sky-blue eyes stared into Grimhide's own. Oh, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Terry. You didn't see me because I was out sick when they went down there the first time. Sick? Yeah, I ran into one of those bubbles that was coming from the mountain and got poisoned. Kirami healed me with the sword. His expression changed to one of concern. Did it heal you too? Grimhide sighed in affirmation, closing his eyes. I'll be fine. Just a bit tired is all. I think it would be best if we spent the day with you, Altairia chimed in, stepping forward. Seems like that Nemesis did quite a number on you. Yeah, I know. I remember when Jack got that Wendigo out of me, I still felt like I was gonna throw up. He and San took me to the lay spot on Tempest Island and that really helped though. That's fine, Terry. You don't need to take me to a lay spa. Mount Inferno still needs someone to guard it. It'll be fine, Altairia reassured the storm gremlin. Grimhide doesn't go down easily. The rest of the day went by pretty slowly. Altairia and Buckthorn spent the day tending to Grimhide's wounds. Altairia even showed the siren a few tricks for making potions. Razor had made a new friend. He and Ruby were probably still prancing around Altairia's trailer. They all felt a little guilty about Grimhide's ordeal, but the dragon was honestly just relieved to be rid of Nemesis' influence. Nemesis. What had been up with Nemesis anyway? As Buckthorn gathered herbs in the jungle of the Wise Serpent, she couldn't help but wonder. She remembered how ruthless the Wendigo general had been back in Yggdrasil's grove in the Emerald Woodland. Heck, even before that at the Dark Carnival and in the Turquoise Archipelago. This time around, Nemesis hadn't even shown its face. Not until it was defeated. It dawned on her. Nemesis was scared. With every fragment found, Nemesis stood less of a chance. And it knew this. And now there was only one fragment of Anima left. The Fragment of Light. A broadsword known as Excalibur. One fashioned by the mythical demigod of youth Pure Eternus, powered by their holy magic. It was a special story. Pure Eternus had every reason to stay in the Grotto of the Young, sheltered from the war, yet they willingly chose to give up their innocence for a greater cause, and in the end it proved to be worth the sacrifice. As Buckthorn gathered the herbs she needed for her potion, she thought about the story. Out of all the backstories of the 6 champions of Altairus, the one of the Light Champion was the one that really stuck with her. Even Mallow the Maelstrom story, as tragic and compelling as it was, didn't hold up to that of Pure Eternus in her mind. Okay, looks like I've got everything. Now which way is back? The reef siren turned around and made her way back up towards the huge mountain in the distance. She could think more about the light fragment later. Right now, she needed to get these herbs to Altairia. That night was peaceful. Everyone had fallen fast asleep to the sound of cicadas chirping and a blanket of stars overhead. All except one storm gremlin. Jack Thunder couldn't sleep, especially not with Terry Paradise snoring just a few feet away. His mind was too busy. He took to flipping through a spellbook he'd found in Altairia's trailer by the light of the moon to fight his insomnia. It didn't seem to be helping. Every page he read spun his head more. All of a sudden, he landed on a page with a spell he'd never seen before. It was called Heaven's Transformation. He read on. Heaven's Transformation is the most powerful undifferentiated anima spell that exists. It is the only spell with the power to permanently transform a Wendigo. Jack Thunder's heart leapt into his throat. If what he was reading was true, this spell he found could stop the Heart of Darkness from ever menacing Altairus again. All he needed to do was recite the incantation and... Wait a minute. There was a lot more to it than that. The book said that there were 3 things needed for the spell to work. The first was spell power. With all the Fragments of Anima together, the Storm Gremlin could manage that. It was the other 2 he was worried about. The Heart of Darkness would have to hate its condition enough to willingly surrender all its ill-gotten anima. As far as he'd gotten on this journey, Jack Thunder still had no idea what the Heart of Darkness was really like. It had always sent Nemesis out to do its bidding. Furthermore, he and the others would have to have enough compassion to believe that the Heart of Darkness could even change. He was worried about all of them, but mostly about Snodder. She was the one who had yelled at him to just banish Nemesis when the Wendigo General surrendered. She would probably just see the Heart of Darkness as a monster that needed to be vanquished and nothing else. Of course, he wasn't too sure if even he would feel anything more than contempt for the Heart either. "What are you reading there?" Jack Thunder jerked out of his thoughts. He turned his gaze upward to meet a red fox face. Altairia was standing over him. Oh, I didn't see you there. I was just reading the spellbook I found in the trailer. I found something in it that I think will really help us." "What did you find?" Altairia sat down next to Jack Thunder. "This right here," Jack Thunder pointed to the page. "It's called Heaven's Transformation." At the mention of the spell's name, Altairia's eyes glinted with recognition. "Heaven's Transformation? That's a very powerful spell." "Yeah, I know. Looks like a nightmare to use, too." Jack Thunder's antennae drooped. "Magic that powerful usually is. The question is, are you willing to take a chance on it?" Jack Thunder thought about it. If the spell worked, he and the others would usher in a new golden era, one where Wendigos never laid waste to Altairus or any other world ever again. He would go down as one of the greatest heroes in history. His mother and father would be proud of him. His expression turned to one of determination. Absolutely. Chapter 12. A Shadow Still Looms. Jack Thunder woke up early the next morning. Lifting Altairia's spellbook off his face, he turned his head towards the sea. The sun peaked just over the horizon, the lapis ocean shimmering in tones of gold and silver. A pleasant smell filled his senses, something like a lit campfire on a cold winter's morning. Shifting a bit, he noticed smoke billowing out of the sleeping Grimhide's nose. That's funny. He would have imagined that Grimhide's flames would smell really rotten, like sulfur. But no. The Storm Gremlin rolled over onto his back. The sky was clear. He sighed in relief. The young heroes had once again triumphed. He was about to close his eyes and drift off to sleep once more when he heard a something clatter next to him. He groaned and sat up, looking towards the source of the crash. The smoky smell wasn't just coming from Grimhide. Altairia and Kirami had set up a small campfire just next to him. The clatter had come from a steel kettle that the latter had dropped. She picked it up and inspected it before setting it above the fire once more. Altairia brought over a small tin container which she reached into, pulling out something black and flaky. She dropped it into the top of the kettle. Kirami noticed Jack Thunder staring. "Oh, I didn't see you were up. Me and Altairia are making some typhonic tea. You want some?" Typhonic tea. Jack Thunder had heard about it before. Legend went that it was created when tea leaves were smoked over logs set alight by a dragon's flame. The leaves absorbed the smoke, making them smell like a winter's end barbecue. That was what Jack Thunder thought of anyway. He nodded. Kirami brought over 2 cups of tea, one for her and one for him. The smoky flavor was a bit strong, not entirely to his taste. Still, it was better than the tea down in Misery Mire. That stuff was just as foul as the land it came from. Why anyone would want to drink something that smelled and tasted like rotting logs was beyond him. Snotter was the next to wake up, followed by Frosty, Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, Terry, and finally San. Each of them were treated to some tea. Even Goliath and Gilgamesh drank some of Altairia's tea. They took turns keeping the fire lit using their flame breath. Shadowpaws sat down next to Kirami. So I guess the Elder Goat was right all along. Right about what? Kirami didn't know what he was talking about. Last Winter Solstice, I asked him for some courage. He didn't exactly give me that, but he did give me these boots. That's why I was running real fast when we fought Grimhide. He chuckled. Looks like I got what I wanted after all. Oh, that's why I didn't see you. Kirami took another sip from her cup. As the two continued to talk, Altairia and San sat next to each other. San shook his head. I never thought I'd see it. A kitsune and a nekomata breaking bread. Altairia sat silently. She remembered how she was at Kirami's age. She hated nekomata, but it was just something everyone did. The kitsune hated the nekomata, and the nekomata hated the kitsune. Like cats and dogs. That's just how things were. Which is probably how the Wendigos got to the Temple of the Four Flames in the first place, she thought. But this new generation gave her hope. They had seen firsthand the harm that petty hatred could do, and they would not let it have the last word. What have you been up to all this time? San asked. After the war, when the fragments were blown away, I went searching for Yuuki again. I worried about what would happen if the sword were to fall into the wrong hands. For many years I searched high and low. The only thing I had to guide me was my magic sensing powers. I met Kirami in Grimberg. She'd lost her family and was waiting for a spot at the orphanage. I offered her a chance to join me and she said yes. She's been my traveling partner ever since. Huh. At least you've done something with all that time. Me? San sighed. I just fled into the Razorfrost range and sat there doing nothing for 11 years. If I hadn't gone looking for Stormbringer, I would still be there. Is that storm gremlin in green yours? Altairia asked. She pointed to Jack Thunder. Yes and no. I met him when my search took me to Tempest Island. He'd actually found Stormbringer in a cave, but his sister had taken it away from him. I wanted to go back out there and wield it myself, but I was in such poor health. I had no choice but to pass on the responsibility. He motioned towards Frosty. That storm gremlin Fiffinella in the blue is his sister. Her name is Frosty. Ah. Well, at least they had each other. Altairia knew of many fairies who had a lot less. The two sat in silence for some time. San was the one to finally break it. You really think she's ready? Altairia held an expression of certainty. I'm positive. This is her destiny. Deep within the barren expanse of the flipside, a single heart throbbed. This heart was black and twisted, its ventricles sprouting vicious vines and covered in eyes and mouths. This was the heart of darkness, and it was not a content heart at all. The Supreme Wendigo had learned all too well of the travels of a certain storm gremlin and his friends. Despite its efforts, they had collected each of the fragments of anima one by one. Now they had 5 in their possession. They only needed one more, the fragment of light Excalibur. Then there would be nothing stopping them from sending the heart of darkness into the night, sealing it from ever having the anima it craved so deeply. The anima it had back when it created the world it had been banished from. It would not stand for this. There had to be another way. It would not send out Nemesis again. Not even its best general could stand up to the team at this point. Even Nemesis seemed to realize that. Its prone form still lay in an inky puddle on the frigid ground next to the heart, bubbling only slightly. Besides, That skullhead had proven itself incompetent far too many times. It had suffered enough. The Heart of Darkness opened a viewing window to Altairus. It could clearly see 5 points of anima near Mount Inferno. It ventured to guess that the heroes were there, but it noticed something else too. Something far to the west of where the 5 were. Something glowing yellow, the color of the light element. Scrolling westward, the heart could see that the glow was coming from the Forest of the Young. This was the homeland of Pure Eternus. Excalibur must have sensed this and made its way home after the explosion that scattered the fragments. This was it. It all came down to this. It just had to stop the heroes from getting to Excalibur. If even one of the fragments was missing, they wouldn't be able to stop its return. In its twisted mind, the Heart of Darkness began to formulate a plan. This time, nothing could go wrong. It would strike out at the forest with everything it had, no more relying on feeble generals to do its bidding. Nemesis lifted its head from the puddle it lay in. He remembered when it berated those Wendigos from the Turquoise Archipelago only a few months ago. It had been so cocky then, but losing to those kids again and again had really taken its toll, and now it wasn't even sure if it wanted this anymore. It was sick of this constant anima hunger, of nothing ever being enough. What would happen if the Wendigos were to drain Altairus? They would just have to move on to another world. It would never satisfy them. Unless... Nemesis noticed the Heart of Darkness's viewing window had changed again. Jack Thunder was on the screen reading a book. The page read, Heaven's Transformation. Nemesis's eyes flashed with renewed strength. This was its only hope. It snarled defiantly towards the Heart of Darkness. No matter what happened, it would make sure Jack Thunder and his friends got Excalibur. Maybe that could convince the Storm Gremlin to use the spell on the former Wendigo general. It just hoped he could forgive it after all this time.